For some unknown reason that still baffles historians to this very day, during the late 80s to early 90s, there was this fascination with cavemen and the prehistoric era. Why? You know what? I have no idea. Nobody does. It was just a weird time.
That's great. But we wanted a Bud Light!
We had cartoon cavemen, we had the Flintstones movie made it to the big screen, dinosaurs on TV shows, Jurassic Park make dinosaurs popular again, comics, cavemen even became lawyers, because, why not? And of course, we can't forget video games. But if you're curious as to which was the very first prehistoric themed video game ever made, we would have to go back to 1980. Dino Wars on the Tandy holds the distinction of being the very first prehistoric themed game. Not to be confused with Dino Wars on MS-DOS or Dino Wars on the NES. Sorry, it is crude, it is old, but it has dinosaurs and the action is relentless. Yeah, well, relentless for a Tandy game from 1980. Hey, I never said it was Primal Rage, okay? Sue me. Then in 1983, something big happened. No, not that. No, not that either. Nope. No, not that. Oh, wait. Really? Damn. 1983 was a pretty big year. According to the charts, prehistoric themed games went from 0 in 1981 and 82 to 15 in 83 alone. Now, I'm not going to go over all of them here, but I think it's safe to say that BC Quest for Tires was one of the big driving forces for the genre that year. The game was inspired by the comic strip of the same name. Nothing crazy here, just a side-scrolling semi-platforming game, but it is one of the early games published by the rising studio Sierra Online. This one was ported to many computers of that time, the Atari computers, the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Apple II, MSX, and even the ColecoVision, among a few others. Another big game that came out that year in the arcades was Rock and Rope by Konami. Most people out here, including myself, will probably know this title after seeing it versus by the name alone. Little trivia with this one is that it was actually released in the Atari 2600 after the crash of '83, and it served as an inspiration for Bionic Commando in the arcades, which was supposedly going to be a spiritual successor to Rock and Rope. Another arcade out that year was Boomer Ranger? Or is it pronounced Boomeranger? Which is supposed to be, I guess, pronounced that way? I'm not sure, but I kept thinking to myself, Boomer Ranger. Don't ask me why. This one was made by Data East. In 1984, we had a slight drop in prehistoric games, but just slightly, getting 14 titles, like home ports of Rock and Rope, as well as a sequel to BC Quest for Tires called Grog's Revenge. BC Bill, which is a complete ripoff of Captain Caveman from Hanna-Barbera, where you hunt for food, cook your kills on a fire spit, and clubbing women over the head so you can drag them back to your cave so they can have babies. In other words, just a regular 80s weekend.
Excellent!
Then things cooled down a bit between 85 to 87 with only 15 prehistoric games released in that time period. You had the BC Tire games ported to other computers, you had Frack, which is a nice looking platforming game where you guide a caveman through short levels armed with a yo-yo, and that one was on the Commodore 64. Then there was Caveman Capers, which is like the dollar store clearance bin version of BC Tires. That's the best way I can put it. Prehistoric Adventures might be the only known text-based game that is tied to this theme. Looking back at it now, a text-based game just seems, odd, but you have to remember that these type of games went back a few years and were still fairly popular in small communities, with the likes of Zork, Star Trek from 1971, and Colossal Cave. These type of games were still prevalent in the 80s. We also have our first Flintstones game ever in 1986 on the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum. However, in 1987, prehistoric themed games made their way to the Famicom. Dino Riki is a top-down run-and-gun shooter that is a decent take on a shmup-style game that was developed by Hudson. There was also Pocket Saurus, Ju Oken no Naso, which I probably just butchered that name all to hell. That was released only in Japan and developed by Tose. Or is it Tosi? Or Tos? A sort of ghost developer of that time. I'm going to be covering them in a future video. This title is a side-scrolling platformer where you are turned into a dinosaur and travel through time in a mech-like suit and occasionally will have a side-scrolling shooting stage. Then you have... Booby Kids. Alright people, let it out, get your heads out of the gutter, let's continue. This one plays like an overhead exploration style game. It has you time traveling to the past and killing poor unsuspecting cavemen and dinosaurs who are just there, minding their own business, by placing holes underneath them so they can fall in and become skeletons. What the hell is wrong with you? Look at this guy here, he's just minding his own business. Oh wait, let me open a hole in the ground so you can die. Collect all the coconuts or whatever the heck they are to get the exit to that stage to open up. It's a weird game. In '87, the Xenozoic Tales comic was officially published for the very first time as a standalone comic book. Now lots of you out there might be wondering why this is a big deal. Well, not only is it one of the very few comic books out there that blends prehistoric themes with modern day technology, but it will go on to be rebranded as Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. That rebranding would go on to have video games, a cartoon, as well as action figures released into the 90s. In that same year, we got this catchy theme song.
We used to be 4 ordinary teenagers, until one day, we met some new friends from out of town. They were called Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs meshed sci-fi and dinosaurs into one interesting cartoon. I never saw it, never got into it, but gotta love that intro. A bunch of teenagers get to help some dinosaurs battle some evil dinosaurs. Again, I never got into it, but this is a classic and the intro is right up there with some of the best cartoon intros of that era. In '88, we got 11 games released. The big one here was Caveman Olympics on the Commodore 64. This one was developed by Dynamics, and it's basically what you think it is. The Olympics, but it has UG attached to it. However, the one that grabbed my attention that year, and I'm sure it did for others as well, was the legendary Axe on the TurboGrafx 16. Again, you have to remember that the TurboGrafx was the new kid on the block back then, and it was still trying to grab the attention of gamers here in the US. First of all, can I just say kudos to the art team for actually taking the time and making a, decent looking box art cover? Because oh man, those TurboGrafx 16 early cover art pieces, not good. This game was a nice solid side-scrolling action game developed by Victor Musical Industries. Now, that's weird. A company called Victor Musical Industries creates a game called The Legendary Axe. I don't know, I thought they would create like a music-based game or something. The gameplay is outstanding, along with the graphics and the music. Some out there would argue that this game is not a prehistoric game since the protagonist uses an axe with a handle, which were not made by humans until much after the Stone Age, dating back only to around 6000 BC or so. But I would like to add something educational and informative to that argument. Moving on. That same year we got Legendary Axe, we also got this classic cartoon. Denver the Last Dinosaur was a cartoon show about some kids who found a dinosaur and brought him up to speed on current 80s trends, cause that's what we did back then. He also used a piece of his egg to transport the kids to the time he originated to so he could educate them on dinosaur trivia. And oh man, if this intro doesn't overwhelm you with 80s vibe, nothing will. On the movie screen, The Land Before Time was released and has gone on to become one of the all-time classic animated movies of that time. In fact, this movie has spawned 13 sequels and an animated show that was released in 2007. That last sequel of this franchise was released in 2016, and I do hope that is the last one, but I doubt it. Then in 1989 is when we get that one game that I think kicked the Caveman themed games into overdrive, and we got some solid titles overall. Now first, let's talk about the big one, the one that became a commercial success. Cover your ears, England, because I'm gonna say it, bonk. Okay, there. You saw the commercials, bonk was everywhere. The TurboGrafx have been struggling here in the US up to that point, and this title kind of provided a little bump in popularity for the system. Then there was Renegade 3, the final chapter. Wait, hold up a second. Is this correct? Isn't Renegade a fighting game? Hold on a second. The same game that was a huge stepping stone in the evolution of the beat-em-up genre sank so low that we ended up in prehistoric times. Well, at least for the first level. This game has no real story. All we know is that the protagonist, simply called Renegade, travels through time as he tries to save his girlfriend. Now, does he have a time machine? How did he get it if he does have one? How did his girlfriend end up stuck in a different time period? Do the dinosaurs have a time machine as well? These are all questions that I wish never to pursue in answering by playing this game. Now, I know it's not entirely based on prehistoric times, but the premise and absence of any sorts of explanation or storyline to explain what the hell is going on here is enough for me to mention this train wreck on this video. We also got Toki, a game about a simple man being turned into an ape by a wizard of some type who took his female partner. You know, it happens. And he wears a football helmet. Okay, let's not get into the whole why is there a helmet in prehistoric. You know what? Just move on. This one was a surprise hit for many out there and offers some nice action and platforming that got ported to many systems, including the Lynx. Hey, just spoke about that thing on my last video. What are the odds? Let's not forget Prehistoric Isle, a nice side-scrolling shooter by SNK. This was a nice surprise because SNK wasn't really known for that many shooters, although they did make a few here and there, don't get me wrong. But this one has tons of dinosaurs and some great levels and animations, along with really vibrant colors. Now, I guess the success of Bonk, as well as some of the other titles I mentioned, piqued the interest of developers because in 1990, we saw 19 prehistoric themed games come out. Some just the same title but ported over to many different consoles or computers, but 19 overall is still a lot. One of the most interesting ones that, to me at least, would be Time Machine, developed by Vivid Image and released for the Atari ST, Commodore 64, Amiga, Amstrad, and even the CX Spectrum. The game is not long, but the premise is once again time travel, only this time, unlike Renegade, you actually have some backstory to tie the time traveling aspect to the game. You have to solve cryptic puzzles in order to get back to the present time, making your way through the prehistoric time. Oh look! Another Dino Wars game. How did I miss that one? We also got a dinosaur racing game. That's a first. And then we got Trog. Now, look, don't get me wrong, okay? If you like this game, that's great. More power to you. I am not gonna sit here and criticize you for that. But it is Trog, which also made its way to the NES, where I feel it got more exposure. The digitized claymation type graphics are what really stood out during that time. Even the Game Boy got into the craze with Primitive Princess, which was developed by Sunsoft. 1991 was also a big year for prehistoric games, with Caveman Ninja coming out and being rebranded into Joe and Mac for some ports. Why did that happen? I have no idea. Although I do know that back then the word ninja for some reason was, I don't know, taboo in the UK. Can somebody explain to me why? Next, we got Chuck Rock, which was published by Core Design, the same people that would go on to work on Tomb Raider years later. This one got ported to many consoles and some computers as well. Chuck actually served as a mascot of sorts for Core Design, believe it or not, before they went with Lara Croft. I don't blame them. Not the best platformer out there, but it is a slightly above average title. Meanwhile, on the TV side, we got the Dinosaurs show that ran between 1991 and 1994. Now, this TV show was supposed to be a huge deal due to the very impressive puppeteering work to bring each character to life with no CGI anywhere. This show is mostly known for what is considered to be one of the most, if not the most, depressing endings of any sitcom ever. Not gonna spoil it here, you can watch it on YouTube, but oh man, what a downer. On a lighter note, staying on the TV side, we got Phil Hartman once again playing a character based on a lawyer, only this time, he's a caveman lawyer. I bet you didn't see that one coming, huh? A classic character, pulled off only as Phil Hartman could. We can't forget Land of the Lost, which was a TV series that was actually released as a remake of a 1970s TV show of the same name. The show was about a family that got stuck in a prehistoric type world, and had to basically survive from week to week. The series overall had pretty good accolades and a lot of good feedback from TV critics, but unfortunately didn't do well with viewers. There was also a pretty cool toy lineup that was released in conjunction with the TV show. The NES got, let's see, Big Nose Caveman by Camerica, and the first Flintstone game on that console made by Taito. Bonk got a sequel as well, finally, a PC Engine exclusive again, and we also got lesser known titles in other formats such as Caveman and Prehistoric with a K. 1992 was the peak year for this era of prehistoric games, with a total of 22 games being released, but many of them are just rehash ports. However, we have some interesting games that year. Evo, The Search for Eden, has got to be one of the most unique among the others listed in this video. It was developed by Almanac, and it plays like a hybrid of action evolution simulation with RPG-like elements. This is another game I have to play sometime down the road, but you basically start off in the ocean in prehistoric times and have to evolve through time and different forms. You can choose what traits to evolve as you go from ocean to land. Very ambitious title with minimal overhead to keep it fun. The Atari Lynx got Dino Olympics, and Stone Age was released on the Atari ST. Bonk came over to the Game Boy, which surprised many back then since Bonk was seen as a Turbo exclusive and their console mascot. Now all of a sudden he's on a Nintendo console. I wonder why. Oh yeah, the Master System finally got a Flintstones game. A little too late, but it got one. The Humans is a Lemmings-inspired style game released for the Genesis, and it's on the Game Boy as well. This one was developed by GameTech, so if you like Lemmings but want a prehistoric twist to it, try this one out. And then we get Now think Crazy Taxi, but with no taxi, well, kind of a taxi, in prehistoric times and on a 2D plane. Data East also gave us Tatake Genshin 2 Rookie no Boken, which I probably butchered that one as well, which was supposed to be a sequel of sorts to Caveman Ninja, aka Joe and Mac, and rebranded to Congo's Caper for the Western release. This one has you playing as a kid that turns back into a monkey when hit. Very colorful graphics and pretty good overall gameplay, I would say. In fact, I will go as far as to say this one's a hidden gem among the Super NES library. What do you guys think? So 1992 wasn't a huge year in terms of outstanding game titles in this type of genre, but in 1992, we got one of the silliest fun-filled movies of that time. At least for me.
From Hollywood Pictures, he's a caveman who just stepped into the 20th century.
Whoa!
Now, two guys from Encino are going to teach him to be normal.
That's boring, kid. Normal. We're going psycho with him, bro. Shut.
Encino Man.
I'll be back.
Rated PG.
1993 brought us a sequel to Chuck Rock called Chuck Rock 2, Son of Chuck, and it got ported to Genesis, Sega CD, Amiga, and the CD32, but no Super NES. A note to creators out there, don't do sequels with the protagonist kid as the main character. It just doesn't go well. Look at the track record. Speaking of movies, that is the year that Jurassic Park came out in theaters, and it was a gigantic hit for Steven Spielberg and dinosaurs. Now I grappled on whether to include the Jurassic Park games, but you know what, in the end, I decided against it since they take place in modern day, but with dinosaurs. However, I will be covering the Jurassic Park games down the road in a standalone video. Stay tuned for that one. We also got Bonk 3, which will be the last Bonk title exclusive to the PC Engine TurboGrafx 16, Prehistoric 2, as well as Bonk for the NES. Even though by now it was almost out the door. The Flintstones also got a title released for the Genesis, and I believe this is the first 16-bit Flintstones game. And you know what? This is a solid platformer with some nice graphics and music. Now, it's amazing to think that we missed out on so many good titles then and now. Just too many games out there to play. I don't know about you all out there, but my backlog just keeps growing exponentially. 1994 brought us two arcade games, Primal Rage, which was a huge hit for Atari games, and Bonk's Adventure, the only arcade entry for the franchise, and it was developed by Kaneko. On the Game Boy side, we got GB Genshin Land, Viva Shikun Okoku, which is a Bonk game that consists of mini-games only and was released in Japan and China. We also got a sequel called Bonk's Revenge that introduced transformation to the series and was available for the Game Boy. While on the NES side, we got Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, which now fetches a pretty penny over at eBay, and Super Bonk for the Super NES. 1994 only had 12 titles released, many being ports from other platforms. This is where the caveman prehistoric genre rapidly went down. But not before we got the Flintstones movie on the big screen. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually liked this film when I saw it in theaters. It's not a bad movie, and it's a nice way to maybe introduce the Flintstone characters to your kids. 1995 gave us only a few titles like BC Racers, developed by Core Design and ported to the 32X, the Sega CD, 3DO, and the PC. This was a mediocre racer with some really nice graphics. On the Super NES side, we got Super Bonk 2, which was released only in Japan, unfortunately. It's a shame because it's a solid title platformer with fun gameplay. Check out my video on it. But after these two games, you got ports of existing titles, a Flintstones game on the Super NES, and Prehistoric Man making its way to the console as well. After this, the genre didn't die out, but it plummeted so much that only a handful of games were released most years. But nothing even close to the mass influx that took place between 1983 and 1995. In that time span, we got around 174 games or so, and even that number, I am sure, is not very accurate, as I found games like Congo's Caper and Primal Rage not being on the list, yet games like The Secret of Evermore and Renegade 3 are included in that list. Now, I don't point this out to blast or criticize the folks who worked on this website right here, because I think it is an amazing repository of information not only for gaming, but in combining and categorizing genres for use and education. But I do have to point it out to remind us that even when obtaining information that may seem accurate, a little bit of extra research and insight could yield additional data that could be useful in the end. I am also aware that some games mentioned here in this video are not fully immersed in the prehistoric era, but sometimes only relegate a certain level or couple of them to that as a backdrop to maybe the overall story, such as the Time Machine for the Amiga. Then there were some interesting titles following that time span, like Prehistoric Isle 2, which is an awesome shooter by the way, Tale of the Sun on the PS1, The Adventures of Darwin on the PS2, Torque and Crawl for the Zeebo, yeah, the Zeebo, look it up, and many more. Now, why did this strange fascination with prehistoric times and cavemen suddenly boom in the 80s through the mid-90s? I still have no idea. I guess it's similar to that ninja boom we had in the 80s here in the US. We seem to go through waves of fascinations as a society. Maybe the caveman fascination will pop up again sometime down the road. But looking back now, was the caveman era in gaming a good thing, or did you find it annoying or useless as far as themes for gaming goes? What are some of your favorite games during that time, or maybe some of the worst? Share with us all and see you in my next video. Until then, keep watching and keep gaming.
And taking a look at the long-range forecast, continued snow, darkness, and extreme cold. This is Howard Handupme. Good night. Goodbye.